This is for educational use only. Our group is allowing our instructor, Mr. Roldan Ardinas, to use this as an educational material. So, Asian regionalization, or commonly called as regionalism, happened after the Cold War with the creation of various regional institutions for nearly 2 decades after the 1980s. So, this happened after the Cold War. So, it means some of the countries or some of the nations are suffering from poverty, from scarcity, and it's why they think another way in order for them to get civilized, to get more productions, in order to stand after the Cold War. And yes, in our presentation, we will be displaying different questions, and of course that will be relevant in order for us to understand and um, relate ourselves regarding with what really is regionalization or regionalism, how does it work, and what are the factors that affects regionalism, and of course, how does Philippines, our country, relates to the process or the activities that should be done with the Asian regionalism. So, before I'll proceed to the next reporter, allow me to provide with you the basic information about regionalism. So, regionalism, it encourage local governments to pool resources, talents, and efforts. So, since regionalism it's quite opposite to globalization, since globalization it involves a group of nations, while regionalism involves dividing the um, process into different places or regions, and in this way we can help to segregate the processes in order for us to make the process easier, not literally faster, but that is to listen the um, to listen the process, and that will really create a unity upon one nation civilization. And yes, hi everyone, this is again Engine Cadet Magale Jebert C, the group leader of the Group 1. And in this video presentation, we will tackle about the Asian regionalism. And all right, let's go ahead and discuss the learning objectives in this video presentation. So the first is we're going to differentiate between regionalization and globalization. So in the previous terms, we already talked about the globalization, and in this term, we will be discussing the difference between regionalization and globalization. And the second one is to identify the factors leading to greater integration of an of the Asian region. So this topic, we will be going to identify what are the factors that leads the specific countries in the Asian that has been improved into a greater integration because of regionalization. And lastly, we're going to analyze how different Asian states confront the challenges of globalization, and regionalization. So we will be also answering questions that will give us the analytical states on how we confront the challenges of the globalization towards regionalization. All right, so just sit back and relax, and we hope that you will learn a lot of lessons regarding the Asian regionalization.
Hi, I'm Jen Cadet Dela Torre and I'm here to report why there is an Asian regionalism. First, we should tackle what is Asian regionalism. Asian regionalism, it is a product of economic interaction, not political planning. East Asian economies in particular focus on exporting to developed country markets rather than selling. And what is economic interaction? Economic interaction is the form of exchange of goods, services, and money, and interaction simply means reciprocal action. The effect of one's actions or influence action by the economic agents. Why there's an Asian regionalism? Because Asian regionalism is primarily motivated by the desire to advance welfare in the region. It would detracting from developments elsewhere. On the contrary, Asian regionalism can help to sustain global economic progress at a time when other major regions are reaching economic maturity. What is economic progress? Economic progress might be understood to mean an increase in the capability of society to produce higher valued, more and better goods and services with the use of same and equivalent resources. How Asian regionalism benefits to Asian country? Through dynamic and outward-looking Asian regionalism can bring huge benefits not just to Asia but also to the world. Why? Because it could help sustain the region's growth, underpin its stability, right policies, and lastly is it reduces inequality. What is the purpose of regionalism? The purpose of regionalism is it is a performative discourse. It seeks to achieve legitimacy of definitions of boundaries and obtain approval for this definition in cultural and political and also popular and official understanding. Why do we have regionalism? We should have regionalism because it encourages local governments to pool resources, talent, and efforts. Collaborating this way creates more effective planning that all governments, be it both big and small, can participate in. It also creates larger budget to deliver stronger results. What causes regional growth? Number one of causes of regional growth is trade or the import and export of goods and services. Number two, migration of people both in their capacity as consumers and in their capacity as workers. Number three is inter-regional migrations of other. Why regionalism matters? Number one, it improves quality of life. Why? Because through our region's transportation, economy, housing, workforce, and social activity transcend country lines. Today, more than half of region's population lives and works in different countries. Regionalism offers a coordinate solution that weaves this system and geographic areas together. Number two, it solves large and complex issues. Why? Some issues are too large for any one unit of government to tackle alone. And Citralina has the experience, data, and expertise to lead holistic area-wide planning. Our broad regional lens allow us to plan for our future with vibrant downtowns. Number 3, it improves efficiency and effectiveness. By the means of regionalism encourages local governments to pool resources, talent, efforts, and collaborating this way creates more effective planning that all governments, both big and small, can participate in. It also creates larger budget to deliver strong results. This turns allows local governments to deliver services and address needs more efficiently with their communities. Number 4 is it protects the interests of all. Why? Because our region framework consider how our towns, cities, countries are linked economically, socially, and geographically. We can objectively weigh how one country's decisions could impact neighboring countries and provide more holistic solutions. 5. Number 5 is it advocates for the region. Why? When local governments use a regional platform to define area-wide priorities, Centralina becomes a unified voice for the region. We use that collective voice to advocate for policies and funding the state and federal level that will support the region's shared priorities. It also aligns federal, state, and local efforts to maximize efficiency and ensure planning efforts are working in the best interest of individuals. And it is also have connections. Because we believe that successful regional leaders are ones who can join the right information, resources, and people together to spark action. That's all.
Good day everyone, I am Cadet Lucero and I'm going to discuss and give examples about regionality. So the definition of regional is something related to taking place in or characteristic of a given geographic location. An accent shared by people in the Boston area is an example of a regional accent. Pertaining to a specific region or district, pertaining to a large geographic region. A region is an area of a land that has common features. A region can be defined by natural or artificial features. Language, government, or religion can define a region, as well as forest, wildlife, or climate. Regions, large or small, are the basic units of geography. The Middle East is considered a political, environmental, and religious region that includes parts of Africa, Asia, and Europe. The region is in a hot, dry climate. Although the styles of government are varied, almost all of them have strong ties to religion. The region is where 3 of the world's major religions were founded: Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. The Amazon River region is South America, is the area surrounding the Amazon River, which runs through the northern part of the continent, including Brazil, Bolivia, Ecuador, and Peru. This region is characterized by warm temperatures, heavy rainfall, a large diversity of plant and animal species, and little human impact on the environment. Geographers also use regions to study prehistoric environments that no longer exist. Due to plate tectonics, or the movement of the Earth's crust. Geographic regions are constantly being created and destroyed over time. Paleogeography is the study of these ancient environments. One paleogeographic region is Pangaea, the supercontinent that existed millions of years ago during the Paleozoic and Mesozoic eras. The continents we know today split apart from the supercontinent of Pangaea. So let's proceed to the languages. A language is used in many ways, and sometimes speakers of the same language have a hard time understanding each other. Within our own countries, we see that the use of national languages can vastly differ from one region to another. Regional dialects are considered to be a distinct form of standard or common language that could be geographically from a province, rural spaces, or in some cases also specific to a social group. Though dialect can be considered of various kinds. The most widespread and evident way of differentiating or defining a dialect is regional or geographical. The differences between regional dialect, as it would seem, depends on proximity. The further you move from one region to another in the same country or territorial space, the more dissimilar the dialect. The classification of regional dialect, however, more concretely follows specific linguistic features as displayed in the usage of the language, grammar, and vocabulary. Studying the word formation helps us understand better where the classification of one regional dialect starts and another stops.
Advantages and disadvantages of regionalism. Advantages: access to new culture. Business globalizations allows organizations to get access to a new culture. For instance, another popular Australian supermarket is called Coles after Woolworths. China is one of the key emerging markets, and thus Coles can expand business in this country. By expanding in the country, Coles can access the Chinese culture so that the customer needs can be better understood. Second is access to new talent. From the same organizational context, of course, it can be stated that for opening the new business in China, the company needs to focus on practicing diverse workforce. The diverse workforce is effective in increasing productivity level with a larger range of skills at Coles. Access to new markets. By expanding business in the emerging market, Coles can be benefited in accessing to new markets. For instance, in case of the premium cuts of beef, Coles can target the market of Chinese middle class. Increased flow of capital. Increased trade to more diverse and larger markets help to generate greater revenue and profit. For instance, while Coles will have access to the emerging market, premium cuts of beef can help to generate higher revenue at the end of the year. As a result of it, the business will be able to identify the increased flow of capital. The disadvantages is higher investment cost. For opening a new plant or purchasing franchise in new country, there is a necessity of a lump sum of amount. For instances, in order to open a new store in China, Coles will have to pay a huge amount to maintain a healthy relationship with the Chinese government. Apart from that, operational investment is there to start business in the new country. Confusing legal system. The legal system can create major difficulty for the firms in globalization. For instance, the governmental policy for environmental protection or reduction of greenhouse gas is different in Australia and China. The Chinese regulation may have more strict restrictions in legislative norms. This the main issue can arrive in terms of proper understanding. Foreign workers exploitation. Based on the organizational context of calls, it can be said that for targeting the Chinese middle-class people with its premium cuts of beef product, lower pricing is essential. Lower pricing is indicative towards the lower cost, for which the Australian company will have to search for cheap labor sources. However, due to tough competition, schools may face major difficulties in implementation. The last one of disadvantages is international recruiting. During international recruitment, culture can create a big issue for companies. For instance, in case of schools is to recruit employees in China, languages is the one of the factors that may create problematic situation. Major misunderstanding can take place while the HR of schools will communicate with the Chinese applicants for employment. In addition to that, there can be a problem in managing the payroll in the new country. Along with that, changes in employment-related laws can bring a challenge in human resource management.
Factors affecting regionalism. Regionalism refers to three distinct elements: movements demanding territorial autonomy within unitary states, the organization of the central state on a regional basis for a delivery of its policies including regional development policies, political decentralization, and regional autonomy. Regionalism is a political ideology which seeks to increase the political power, influence, and/or self-determination of the people of one or more sub-national regions. It focuses on the development of a political or social system based on one or more group of regions or another sub-national entity gaining strength from or aiming to strengthen the consciousness of and loyalty to a distinct region with a homogeneous population, similarly to nationalism. Regions may be delineated by administrative division, culture, language, and religion. Among others, regionalist demands occur in strong forms such as sovereignty, separatism, secession, and independence, as well as more moderate campaigns for greater autonomy such as states' rights, decentralization, or devolution. Strictly regionalists favor confederations over unitary nation-states with strong central governments. They may, however, embrace intermediate forms of federalism. Proponents of regionalism usually claim and strengthening the governing bodies and political powers within a region at the expense of a central government will benefit local populations by improving regional or local economies. In terms of better fiscal responsibility, regional development, allocation of resources, implementation of local policies and plans, competitiveness among regions, and ultimately the whole country consistent with the principle of subsidiarity.
Neo-regionalism shifted national systems of administration and cultural, economic, and political organization following the Cold War. Neo-regionalist projects, which began about the mid-1980s, differed in substance from the earlier rise in regionalist developments, which had begun about 1950s and later become known by the term Old Regionalism. The emergence of new regionalism coincided with the end of the Cold War and a period of increasing global economic integration. Its development ultimately led to regional organizations that were more open with respect to trade than those had formed in the era of gold regionalism. New regionalism gave rise to regional organizations that had a wide-ranging set of stated policy objectives, whereas previous forms of regionalist projects were concerned with economic or security policies. The policies adopted by regional institutions formed or enacted in the late 1980s and early 1990s encompassed environmental and social policy as well as policy to encourage transparency and accountability in governance. With regard to the regional projects initiated by poor countries such as the SADC in the southern corner of the African continent, this regional organization included explicit development objectives extending beyond trade monetary policy. Unlike old regionalism, which was oriented more toward interactions between states, new regionalism involved a variety of state and non-state actors involved in a process of transformation of the world order. Thus, globalization affected new Jheraldism, which in turn participated in shaping globalization. The forces of globalization have had an impact on the restructuring of the social, political, and economic aspect of regions, while states and societies have adjusted to these impacts by furthering, changing, or reversing the effects of globalization through the process of regionalism. Regionalism has responded to cultural globalization through an increasing cultural identity and the rise of regionalist parties. Therefore, it has been properly argued that regionalism is in fact a building block of achieving global peace and cohesiveness through its more specified and regulative approach. Rather, it will be shown that the more important characteristic of this relationship is that regionalism represents a stepping stone on the way to globalization, that it offers what one might call a safer version of globalization, providing the benefits of interstate trade and exchange, while at the same time, regions helps to protect public relations of globalization from negative impact and act as an independent subject of international relations. They can be as multipolar world theory, the theory of large spaces, the theory of convergence, and regional joint doctrine.
What is regionalism in the Philippines? Regionalism in the Philippines can be traced to its history and geography. The Philippines is separated from the rest of Asia by water. It is an archipelago with approximately 7,000 islands and islets. According to the Philippine National Statistics Office, the population of the Philippines is 76.5 million. More than half of the people, which is 58% of it, live in cities. The majority of the population is of Malay origin. Today, 91.5% of the Filipinos are Christian Malays, while Muslim Malays comprise only 4% of the population. The Philippines has a total land area of 100,780 square kilometers and is totally surrounded by water. Because of its isolation by water from the rest of Asia, the Philippines has qualities unlike its Asian neighbors. It is the only Asian Christian nation and is prominent democracy in Asia. Niels Mulder, who observed the Philippines intermittently for 10 years, opines that the Philippines failed to demonstrate the cultural autonomy and depth of history to which he has grown accustomed in other Asian countries. Perhaps the Philippines is unlike its Asian neighbors because of its physical separation from the rest of Asia and its colonial history. Physical and language barriers. Because the Philippines is an archipelago, many of its provinces are separated from each other by water. On the other hand, large islands like Luzon and Mindanao are dotted with mountain ranges that also separate different land areas. As a result of their physical isolation from each other, Filipinos have rich multicultural heritage and speak 150 different languages and dialects. Physical and language barriers have also contributed to the growth of regionalism. It must be noted that even though Filipinos speak many languages, there are only 8 major languages based on the number of speakers, which is Tagalog, Cebuano, Ilocano, Ligaynon or Ilonggo, Waray, Bicolano, Pangasinense, and Kapampangan. Of this Filipino, which is based on Tagalog and was formerly spelled as Filipino, it is the official language along with English. Most textbooks, laws, signboards, and mass media are either in English or Filipino. Regional differences are heightened in urban centers. At the University of the Philippines in Metro Manila, students tend to group themselves according to their regional orientations. Spirito notes that regionalism also dictated the choice of residents' network of friends and patterns of organization of Filipino immigrants to the United States. Indeed, Filipinos who hail from the same regions tend to group together wherever they are. They tend to warm up to others who come from the same provinces as theirs. As Philippine historian Teodoro Agoncillo concludes, the Filipino does not think in terms of national boundaries, but of regional homogeneity. Regionalism as a result of colonialism, because another cause of regionalism is the colonial past of the Philippines under Spain and the United States. Spaniards encouraged regionalism to dissipate any nationalist revolt against them. They practiced a divide and rule policy wherein they employed Filipino soldiers from one region to put down an uprising in another region. In addition, Spanish friars in their desire to evangelize studied the native tongues and incorporated Catholicism into Filipino social customs and religious observances. In doing so, the Spaniards preserved the native languages and dialects of the Filipinos. They implanted Roman Catholicism in the Philippines and influenced the Philippines' legal system, social institutions, literature, and arts. Meanwhile, the American colonial rule also unwittingly encouraged regionalism, but unlike the Spanish rule that promoted regionalism on Philippine soil, the United States encouraged Filipino regionalism in the United States through its recruitment and immigration practices.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And at this juncture, I'll be discussing to you the question regarding what is the difference of regionalism and globalization? So, for sure, I will discuss to you what is really the significant difference between two matters. So, first is that regionalization. It is the process of dividing an area into smaller segments called regions, and that has been discussed on the previous reporter. So, the very good example, and this is that a division of nation into states or provinces. So, for example, here in the Philippines. So we are you one a nation, and we are divided into different regions according to um, Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. And yes, that is a good example of regionalism. And while globalization, as we have tackled already, it is the process of international integration arising from the interchange of worldviews, products, ideas, and other aspects such as technology, media, and other forms of globalization. So, moving forward, the other differences between the two classified into nature. So, as what I've said earlier, globalization promotes the integration of economies. If we say integration, it involves unity, interaction from one nation, from one place, from one culture into different aspects of environment or nature. And yes, all around the world, but regionalization is precisely the opposite because it is dividing an area into smaller segments. So, from the name itself, regionalization. So it's like we divide the nation into a region, and it's like a company. So in a company, in the production of supplies, it is divided into different departments. So we're in the other part. We also differ into a market process. So in globalization, it allows many corporation to trade on international level. So it allows free markets. Thus, on the other hand, the regionalization, it is a system that is where monopolies are more likely to develop. So globalization, it is all about unity, the interaction, the collaboration of different places, different countries, different people, while the regionalization, it will create monopoly. So it's like being dependent, I mean independent. You're just working for one region in order to be more productive and in order to be more civilized. And that's all about the difference between regionalism and globalization. All right, so I already discussed the basic informations regarding with the difference between globalization and Asian regionalization or regionalism. So basically, based on what I have mentioned earlier, so globalization affects economic, political processes at the global level. So it is quite different into regionalism, since regionalism only happens or takes place in a certain region of a nation or in a country, while globalization, it really affects the global earth or all of the nations, all of the countries that is involved in the globalization processes. But regionalization involves, first of all, consideration of various events and the needs of specific areas of the country. So therefore, I can say that globalization, it is the movement of the production in order for us to obtain or sustain the different needs of individuals in in a macroeconomic way, while for the regionalization or regionalism, I can say that it is the microeconomic way in order to produce any goods in order for us to sustain the individual's needs and wants. And moving forward, I also read an article that for those places, especially Philippines, that are archipelagic countries, um, having the regionalization process or systemic strategy, it is more advantage since we are far from each other, and through that way we can take advantage of the different regions richness of resources in order for us to be more productive and in order for us to be more resourceful.